and welcome to another edition of Virana Dialogues with me, Vinay Tewari, in association with the Exchange for Media. I have somebody with me who leads an industry that's possibly something that all of you have consumed. Each one of us used it, each one of us aspires for it, and some of us find multiple uses for it as well. I have with me Suparna Mitra, CEO of the Watches and Wearables Division for Titan, a brand that is iconic in India, perhaps one of the most well-known brands that you could imagine, a brand which I have grown up watching and even consuming. Suparna, welcome to the show. Thank you very much. We're meeting in slightly difficult times. They're improving. But certainly, you represent an industry which possibly would have had a biggest impact of what happened, not just in 2020, but it repeated itself in a much bigger form, say, in 2021. So just to kick it off, my first question, for a brand like Titan, that pretty much was the king of a particular section and everybody aspired to have that brand. The last 2 years would have changed a lot. And in that way, how do you see Titan changing its, the way you've done business and the way you see the rest of the year and the coming years panning out?
Thanks, Vinay. Thanks for this opportunity. Yeah, this brand, Titan, as well as all the other brands of Titan Company in the watches and wearable space like Sonata, Fast Track, Xylus, we are the market leaders, have been for the last 3 decades and more, and enjoy an enviable 50% value market share. Yes, COVID wave one in 2020 was a big dampener, and it was for the entire country, as you know, the full lockdown and everything had come to a standstill. And at that point, we were actually feeling a little nervous, saying that how will the country recover? How will consumers come back? What will be the reason why consumers will come back to a discretionary and non-essential category like watches? If you remember, the last year the whole conversation was on essentials and non-essentials, and it seemed like a frivolous, maybe even a politically incorrect thing to say that, I want to buy some, an object of beauty, of ownership. So it was a slow climb back last year. There were a lot of reasons that we created in order to get consumers back. For example, we did this whole thing of let's get India ticking. And that was it was not a particular brand or even a particular category. It was just to make everyone think that if each of us are not doing our bit, especially people like us who are in the consuming class, if we are not doing our bit, how will the economy come back on track? How? The economy runs on consumers and producers. And if consumers come back, then producers are back, and so on and so forth. So that was one of the things. And then we did things like, we did this whole thing on gifting, occasions and moments and relationships. I think one of the big lessons of COVID wave one and separately wave two has been that, we think of many things as precious in our lives, but actually it's the people around us, the relationships, the people that we care about. Those are the real precious things. And in a scenario where there hasn't been much travel, we haven't been able to go out and celebrate, and many occasions have come and gone, many milestones have been missed. I think gifting has been one thing that is continuing, and people want to express their love and affection to their near and dear ones. So that is another big thing that has helped our recovery. Overall, we were quite happy with our recovery in, say, Jan, Feb, March quarter, because after almost 9 months of not doing that well, we were in a good place. And then, of course, COVID 2 happened, and April, second half of April and May, for the entire country, it was brutal. It was just so hard. And of course, consumption also came to a grinding halt. And then now, I think in this, from June a little bit, and certainly in July, we are really seeing that people are wanting to come back. They are wanting to get into the category. Within the category, brands which have a lot of trust, like Titan, they tend to gain, because when people are coming back into consumption, they go to trusted, familiar brands, because that's what gives them assurance. We have a large retail network, and our network is up and running with the best safety standards. Uh, and the difference from last year to this year, we are also saying that all our sales staff at the stores are also vaccinated. So there are a lot of things that we've done as a company, as a division. Our brands have reached out to consumers in different ways, but overall, it's been a roller coaster of a ride. We were down in the dumps, we recovered, and then there was the next big blow, and now we are in the next phase of recovery.
I mean, actually, your answer kind of partially answered my next question, which was that you said yourself that watches and maybe wearables are perceived to be non-essential in terms of the category, and people wouldn't really go in as the first choice option if you were passing through a difficult like the one we've had in the last 2 years. And that, of course, changes the challenges. And you've told us what those challenges are. Uh, but then the reality is, Suparna, that both watches and wearables are also a very occasion-driven industry, which means, I mean, the bulk of business or whatever comes from people actually going ahead and being part of occasions. You go and attend somebody's wedding, you actually have a birthday party, you have graduation ceremonies, you have stuff happening in college or a farewell party at college. None of that has happened in the last 2 years. And actually, in the way things are going, that fear of big gatherings is going to continue perhaps to have these formal occasions reducing. And hence, the actual need for gifting, people have been able to avoid gifting. I mean, if I can use that word, if I don't have to give it, I don't. If I, in a normal time, if you're invited to a party or a wedding, you would have no option but to carry a gift along, right? That I'm sure is a completely different challenge. I mean, this occasion-driven activity is not going to revive so soon, even now, because the third wave looms, and there are warnings already being issued.
So, yes, the formal and large gatherings have come down. There are two or three things that are actually helping the situation in this context. One is that there has been an unprecedented boom in wearables. And that has also come because a lot of wearables, whether they're smartwatches or smart bands, are about fitness. And I don't think there has been this much interest in people for their interest, their own health and fitness ever, as it has been in the last 1.5 years. So there have been a lot of huge demand on that side, especially on the smartwatches and band side, and that has also helped us. I think the second point is that while larger gatherings have not happened, and I'll give you the example of something like a wedding. There would be weddings where 500 people would be invited. Today, I mean, I don't know the exact number now, but normally there would be 50 or 100 that would be, allowed. So what happens is that in a lot of times, the amount of money that you would have liked to spend, a larger share actually comes to categories like watches, jewelry, because those are things that you would give away to the bride, to the groom. And we see that. In fact, even in this little bit of window we saw in June, mid of June onwards till mid of July, where there were a lot of wedding dates, we saw a good uptick in the demand of wedding watches. And interestingly, we saw almost a 20% increase in the average price. And that goes back saying that somewhere that budget gets redistributed. So yes, uh, overall it is a challenge, but within that, these are some of the silver linings, that yes, people who are buying watches for gifting, whether it is wedding or other occasions, they are being a little more generous in their budgets, because there are not that many things to spend money on. Like a wedding would be a big location, a honeymoon, a lot of travel. All of that is now kind of not possible. So people are redirecting it to things
Two
that
quick
would be there.
questions. Two quick questions come from what you said. There was I mean, I followed some bit of what Titan had planned earlier, and I was very intrigued by that. And I wanted to ask you if you think today that particular scheme or concept that you began was, in your view, was that a success or not? Something like, for instance, self-gifting. I remember Titan pushed the idea of self-gifting a lot last year. Possibly as a feel-good thing, because you were passing through a very difficult time and everybody was holed up at home and not feeling very good about themselves. Today, would you say self-gifting worked? Was that a success? Would you call that a success to the kind of targets that you set for yourself?
Um, we Okay. Let's put it this way: it is a more evolved concept to gift yourself. It's not a standard concept, and that is why it makes for interesting advertising.
That's right.
Having said that, and I was just reviewing, we do a lot of programs around birthdays and anniversaries of our customers, of our loyalty club customers, and in our retail stores. And that percentage of sales that come from birthdays and anniversaries has taken a big jump from, say, 1920 to 2021. And even in the first 2 months, I would say it's seeing a further jump. So self gifting, somewhat of an evolved concept. Maybe some people do it, but gifting in general, and especially gifting to close people, like birthdays could also be self birthdays, could be spouse birthdays, could be children's birthdays. But giving oneself or somebody in the family, giving a member of the family a really nice, fabulous watch for a birthday, it makes for a classic, timeless gift. So that is continuing, and similarly for anniversaries.
I see. Look, I mean, I know Suparna businesses, and especially complicated businesses, difficult businesses like the one that you are in, obviously have a way more nuanced and a more structured approach to it. But I approach a lot of the questions that I asked from a very human behavior point of view, because I believe that ultimately, irrespective of what we learn, whether we read Peter Drucker or we learn in an A grade college, ultimately it's about human behavior. And one of the things that has always intrigued me is that when people perceive a particular brand, how they perceive it makes a big difference in the kind of decision they make. Now, for me, and for a lot of people, I guess in India, Titan was a brand that had its image of being a robust brand. I mean, the common word you would say is, "बहुत अच्छा है, आप उसको ले लो, अच्छा चलेगा, मजबूत है." Those kind of words you would always hear. Because if somebody would ask just a peer review, कि कौन सी घड़ी लें, they would say Titan ले लो. That's how we brought up. Now, that particular concept has slightly changed, which means that being a very strong legacy brand can become possibly a bit of a handicap when you're trying to compete with, say, global niches where snob value takes precedence. Today in the watches division, I mean, nobody now buys a watch to see the time. I mean, cell phones are providing the same service, right? It's moved on to being an accessory or maybe a show-off piece or something that you just show off and say, "Oh, look, this is the one." It's a collector's item more than a convenience item. So when you have something like that, do you believe that Titan's legacy of being a very strong, legacy brand becomes a barrier to trying to reinvent yourself to being a more, aspirational, expensive niche segment?
So this is a very interesting question, and it's the kind of thing that we employ and deploy a lot of our time in kind of solving for this intellectual challenge. There are two parts to it. One is that there is definitely in India, this great aspiration towards foreign brands across categories, right? And watches is a category where, in fact, almost all of our competition is, they're all international brands. Uh, Second point is that the fact that we are known as excellent watchmakers actually goes in our favor, because the horology, the science, the trust that comes from knowing watches, even like I said, the retail network or the service network. If anything happened to a Titan watch, or even if it was just about changing your battery every 2 or 3 years, I know where to go to. I know I will get a qualified technician who will open it, put it back together. And so there is all of that that helps us. The fact is that there is aspiration for international brands, and number two is that there is a big premiumization drive that's going on. And again, it's across categories. It's certainly true for our category, where maybe 10 years back 5,000 was considered a big thing, like an expensive watch. Today people buy 15, 20,000 watches with not no big consideration. It's just like a very normal. And I think that's is something that we had taken cognizance of a few years back. So we've also been on the premiumization journey. In Feb this year, in Feb 2020, we launched the highest priced Titan watch at 1,95,000. This is not a gold watch. We have gold watches made of gold under our sub-brand Nebula, which is at 5, 6, 7 lakhs. But then there is a certain value of gold because there's a weight of gold and a cost of gold. As a watch, we made 200 limited edition pieces of this fantastic marvel of engineering called Titan Edge Mechanical, and 100 each in each design. And it sounds like, ये कितने लोग हैं जो टाइटन, मतलब 2 लाख की घड़ी टाइटन, how does it all put together? It does. There are enough watch connoisseurs who actually they have a lot of other Swiss watches, and they now bought into Titan because they felt that the mastery, the workmanship, the horological excellence of this one piece was really worth it. There were also a lot of Titan, what I would call upgraders, people who've bought watches, maybe the Titan Edge or the Titan Ceramic Edge at 25,000, and they're like, I know this brand, I love this brand, I'm ready for this watch, I'll go get one. So we've had this one watch is important, not just because it, the number of pieces we sold, but it's because it broke the mental barrier in our head as well as in the consumer's head on what is the premium watch that a Titan watch can command, and why. The why comes from a whole bunch of things that comes together. It's one of the slimmest mechanical watches, and
Right.
it's beautiful, it's slim, it's mechanical. Like I said, it's a piece to treasure. So there are all these trends. So we are also having that, but we are also having a lot of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 rupee watches because that's where the bulk of the market lies. And we are an inclusive brand. I think that's the other thing about the emotional quotient of the brand is that a lot of brands and a lot of luxury brands, their trick is in on being exclusive. And so consumers want to somehow enter the club. For us, we've always been inclusive, and it's not about the price point. It's just that we are, the way Indians are. We will welcome everybody to our house, we will welcome everybody to our store. And inclusivity gives it a certain warmth and a certain comfort. But I think Titan has also stood for a certain level of class. And these two seemingly opposite things, like class can be seen as a little more cold, or if it is very warm, it can be seen as a little more mass. But when you combine class and warmth, you are in that zone, what I call the Titan zone, where there is, yes, it's a legacy brand, but there is enduring quality to that legacy. It's not a legacy that has an expiry date. It's a legacy that's building on itself.
So actually, again, very interestingly, you said two things that would have been my next questions. And, this particular watch that you mentioned, which cost 1.95 lakh rupees, was one of my specifications. And what I was most intrigued by was this. Look, anybody who's buying a watch which is close to 2 lakhs or more is not a price conscious consumer. There's no way. A price conscious consumer will look at something, say, even between, say, maybe 10 to 20,000, but not more than that. So if you see, every time that I've gone to a mall or a shop and I overhear conversations, I see the first thing the salesman asks is, "Sir, aapki range kya hai?" That's the first question the salesman asks. When a person looks unsure and not very sure of what he or she wants, the salesman inevitably asks range kya hai. And then when the guy specifies his range, he will give him 4 or 5 options or her 4 or 5 options, and he chooses one of them. Now, anybody who's buying something more than 1.5 lakhs, 2 lakhs is not that aapki range kya hai consumer. Now, if with that specification in mind, the international brands obviously also cost around the same or maybe a little bit more here or there, even if the price goes up to 3 or 4 lakhs. In that concept, my question specifically was this: is cost the only way to premiumize, if there's a word like that, a particular brand? One way of, cosmetics, for instance, thrives on the idea of making something cost heavy so that it looks premium. It may have exactly the same components that somebody else has, but it thrives on costing. In watches or wearables, for instance, is cost the only way to make it premium? Because if that is the case, or if that's not the case, then the legacy brand would weigh heavy on trying to get people away from not showing off and saying, "Look, I've got a Swiss this brand or an American that brand." Is cost the only way to premiumize a brand?
No, no, no. Cost is certainly not the only way. And the category of watches is also interesting because consumers buy watches for three or four need states. They come from three or four need states. And like you established right in the beginning, it is not about timekeeping, right? So one need state is style, accessorization, completing a look, and that was a very prominent need state in like the pre-COVID days when you had different occasions. You had to go to work, you had to look the part. So you would, wear a certain, if you were a man, you'd wear a certain kind of shirt or suit or shoes or watch. Or if you were, going for a wedding, or if you were going for a weekend brunch, you had to look the part from top to toe, and the watch would be an accessory. So there is that space which is more about fashion, style, etc. Then there is the space of status, which is really how does your brand get pegged in terms of some kind of ladder of premiumness or luxury or etc. So that's the second need state that comes from. And the third one, which is self-expression, which is neither about fitting a certain ensemble look, nor is it about, I have come a long way, now I'm worth this, or, people of my cohort, of my level are wearing XYZ watch. But it's more like I am this kind of a person. And I think that is the way that actually Titan, a lot of premiumization of Titan is along that. So we have sub brands. For example, Raga. Raga is a sub brand of Titan that has tremendous appeal among women in India, and it comes from the fact, so cost of price is actually not so prominent. It is that it is a certain ethos, it is a certain beauty, a sense of femininity, which is not a very soft kind of femininity. It is actually a very strong and self-expressive femininity. And Raga is sitting right there. And it is the kind of price points we are able to get in Raga is also quite interesting, quite high, because that Raga customer buys into the self-expression mode that Raga invokes in her. I'm the Raga woman, and I have this combination of beauty and strength in me, and I want to express myself. So, Raga is an example, Edge is an example, Octane is an example. Xylus is another brand which is, or it's Swiss made. It's a brand owned by Titan. A lot of people who use Xylus because it stands for a certain emotive value of design and the way it comes together. So the long and short of it, Vinay, is that if you look at the emotional positioning and how different brand, even there may be two brands exactly at the same price point, but they're appealing to different parts of your brain. And they're saying one is evoking maybe a more sporty angle, one is evoking a more dressy angle. And I see why I would buy. I mean, one is that I am, say, a Raga type of consumer, and I'm constantly buying Raga. The other is that sometimes I am in a Raga mood, or that's my what I want to express. But sometimes I want to express something else because there are many me's within me. And these are the layers that brands actually use. And certainly we in Titan, in watches, we have a whole portfolio of brands, and we have sub brands. And a lot of this is coming from consumers, the insight that consumers that we have of consumers, that is going deeper into their emotional needs.
Right. One of the things that intrigues me is, I mean, look, Titan at one point of time was almost the timekeeper to the nation. I mean, everybody looked at Titan to keep their time and to manage things. And then, of course, the world changed, everything changed, and the company evolved to, making Titan a brand which is aspirational. I mean, even the company started calling itself Watchables and Wearables. It's not just about watch. It's not about just looking at the time. And now, because of pandemic, you mentioned yourself, just a short while back, that people have become very fitness conscious, and there are a lot of these wearables which are fitness devices that people are actively using. All of us are using, I'm using, everyone's using. Now, in your own world, does this, it's a very serious evolution from being timekeeper to becoming aspirational to becoming a little bit of a, kind of a jewelry equivalent, and now becoming almost as if a health accessory organization, because that's a big growing segment. Do you guys see it as a glass half full or the glass half empty? That we've gone into a completely new segment. I mean, you're almost now providing health services to people on the go. I mean, I can check my BP, I can check my pulse, I can check my various other parameters on my wearable. So, is the fundamental character of Titan evolving a good thing, or is it something that you worry about that it is taking away from the legacy? Because you're not. I mean, nobody would have imagined Titan being, a front player in providing health service wearables. I mean, that's not something we would have thought of, say, 10 years ago. And now it's a reality. Does that look like a glass half full to you or glass half empty to you?
I think it's an opportunity of a lifetime. And, in the first wave of pandemic, there was a word that was used a lot, which I'm not hearing this as much, the word pivot. So a
That's right.
lot of companies, we are pivoting, I mean, bunches of companies pivoted to making masks, but that's one level of pivot. But I do think that this is the opportunity of a lifetime to transform ourselves. See, one of the things is that we can say we were a watches company, we are a watches and wearables company, but at the heart of it is that we were always a consumer company. And we always appeal to, I would say, the vast Indian middle and upper middle class, middle, upper middle. We are not in some hi-fi premium, nor are we, So the changing, evolving needs of this consumer base is actually helping us evolve, learn new things, become more relevant and useful for the consumer. I think that's a very big plus. So, I mean, right now I'm wearing the Fast Track Reflex 3, and it of course happens to match what I'm doing, so it's also doing the self-expressive, the matchy thing, and it's also feminine, it's a nice color, it goes with what I'm wearing, it goes with me. But in this is there with me 24/7.
Right.
I'm seeing how many steps, I'm seeing my heart rate. There are times when, and I'm just, it's a bit of a personal anecdote, almost bordering on a joke. Before I go into a big meeting and I'm really prepared, I check, is my heartbeat okay? Should I take a few more, deep breaths before I go in? It is actually a invaluable companion in my life. It gives me my sleep metrics. Again, there are days like tomorrow morning, I have a morning flight, and there are days I lose my sleep in the night because I'm thinking about how I will wake up in the morning. I think there are a lot of people. And this gives you things like, yeah, your sleep this is the quality. You should do this. It's not like we don't know. We all know what is good for us. We know that we need to walk how many steps. We know what we need to do in terms. It's just that this device is now a catalyst. It's a companion. And that is a huge plus for me. So yes, watches has their own role. Wearables, smartwatches, smart bands have a additional added, accentuated role, and it's something that I think, like I said, I'm really very grateful that this pivot has happened and that we are gathering and lot of momentum in this. We are one of the big players. We have very, very ambitious plans going ahead. So, and it also gives everybody in the division something new to learn. Like starting from the sales representative at the store who's now learned something about a new category. He or she may have been selling watches for a long time, but now you need to know how to sync, you need to know what is the app, you need to know the tech details. It's just, all we are a learning organization because of this intervention.
So
And that's
I,
great.
so I mean, it's maybe a little naughty to say the way I'll put this question, but look, you're currently Suparna Mitra is the CEO of the Watches and Wearables Division. Do you guys now distinguish between watches and wearables? Because soon it'll all be wearables. I guess there will be no real watches division, right? Is that fair way to look at it? Because ultimately it is now more about wearables and not so much about watches.
So the wearables growth is, of course, monumental, but the base of watches is still very large. So it will remain watches and wearables. Maybe in sometimes it'll become wearables and watches. But I do think watches, and I'll tell you why I think watches will continue, is because there is a certain, in India, there is always an aspiring segment, and they're always coming into the market. They're coming, one of our brands, Sonata, is like it's an economy brand and actually converts the unbranded to the branded. And we find huge numbers of people who come in and who are, this Sonata is their first branded watch. And it's a very big thing. So I think it will be some time before it becomes only wearables. Like I said, the base of watches is huge. And also, Vinay, it also depends on the ingenuity and the desire of the marketer, of the company, to arrive at newer and newer reasons to give to the consumer so that they buy watches, apart from the reasons that they have for buying wearables. And, the examples I gave, say an Edge Mechanical or a Raga, these are good examples. Those needs will never go out.
Right.
Some new needs have come in, but the old needs will remain.
Right. Before I wrap up, one other curiosity question I had: is Titan Pay a success? Do you think that's a success story, or do you think there's still a lot of headroom for it to grow? Because that's actually getting into a space which is, which of course is sometimes a natural extension of what you do, and maybe a sign of the kind of times that we're living in, where you need to have these, add-ons which consumers need. But would you call Titan Pay a success, or do you think that's something that you would need more work on?
It is a need of the times. It is a success. Having said that, payment is a it's also an industry that has a lot of regulatory and other changes that are happening. So one has to keep up, one has to constantly remain within the ambit of the regulatory authorities, because it's payment, right? It's money. But from a idea point of view, contactless payments has gone through the roof, and to be able to be hands free and have the contactless payment option is a very, very good insight. It's a brilliant piece of consumer insighting, and actually the timing of Titan Pay also worked out really well. I mean, honestly, we've been working on it for a while with SBI and Yono, but the timing happened just after COVID, so it worked out well. So payment is a very interesting use case and an interesting proposition. It needs constant work. It's not something that has become so big or exploded so much because of many other conditions that need to be satisfied.
So that's something that you'll stay with. I mean, it's not something that you're intending to get out of in that sense.
No.
Right, because I mean, payments is a crowded market. Everybody wants to get into it, and more players are getting into it. Everybody's finding more customized vehicles. Before I wrap up, one last question. I mean, now I think the country and pretty much the world has figured out how to deal with the pandemic. I think people have initially you had a situation where either were people completely careless or completely paranoid, and you never had somebody in between. But I think the lessons have taught us that if you're practically, and use common sense, and you have a practical approach towards how to handle it, you can possibly do it. And of course, as vaccination speed goes up, you may have a much better situation going forward. So, if from that point of view, do say, divisions like yours look at the coming year with some bit of optimism, knowing fully well that we burnt our fingers once, thinking that once the first wave ended, that everything is going to be fine, and we burnt our fingers very badly. Now, with the talk of third wave or fourth wave or Spanish flu equivalent discussions that keep happening, does that make you change the way you would look at your next financials or a couple of financials, or you think that the worst is over and we should be on a fairly consistent plane now going forward?
So Vinay, honestly, nobody knows, right? And I really believe in focusing on things that one can control, because there are things that one cannot control, and that is what will happen. We need to be prepared. We need to have the plan A, plan B on what we are doing. We are, of course, taking extraordinary measures for safety in our own ecosystem, in our factories, stores, etc., and also in with our customers. And and of course, like you mentioned, the overall vaccination, etc., is giving a certain sense that there will be, because in between wave one and wave two, there was nothing that had changed. There was
That's
no real vaccination is still at a very infant stage, whereas now people have understood and realized that they can do this. Public behavior is difficult to predict. Public memory is notoriously short. 2 months back, people were, doing all kinds of, they were talking to absolute strangers and saying, can I get oxygen? But you know how it is. Now, I'm not saying here, I'm not passing any judgment. It is the way it is. This is what it is, right? I think I would, I concentrate on what are the things that we can do as a business that will, that is on innovation. So we give newer and newer reasons for people to come in, be on efficiency, on execution, on safety, on planning. I think the first wave also helped us do a lot of soul searching on, because we our division is 34 years old, and so we've been doing things for 3 decades in a certain way, and a complete halt actually made us stop and think, why are we doing it this way? Is there a better way of doing any particular activity? Certainly the digitalization of many processes and many other things have helped us learn that there are newer, more efficient ways of doing it. For example, I mean, I tell my team often that if we were to start this business today, how would we structure ourselves? How would those processes be? What would serve our customers best now? Now, I'm not saying that we will, that is the reality today. The reality is that we are what we are. But this allows us to think unfettered on what the future can hold. So I am very, very confident and very bullish about not just recovery, but also about this whole whatever has happened as a huge chance given for many of us to relook and to re-architect ourselves, to reimagine ourselves, and really craft a new future uh, for the next 4 5 years, which is going to be really really exciting.
Right. So on that very positive note, Suparna, thank you very much. It's been a great learning, last half an hour for me. And I'm hoping that everyone else who watches it would have learned a thing or two about how the watches wearable industry works and it's fighting its way through. And I wish you and Titan all the smiles, and may you continue to go well. Thank you very much, Suparna, for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vinay. It was lovely talking. It was really enjoyable talking to you.